everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Universe Within podcast. On this episode, I sat down with Alejandra Ortiz. She also goes by the name Almunis. And she was recommended to me a long time ago by a good friend of mine, and then more recently by a gentleman who's working with us, dieting with us. And she works a lot with the voice. She runs workshops, which I believe she calls the activation of your authentic voice. And she's a really fascinating woman. She is originally from Colombia, and she was a singer, a musician, and then she really began to discover the power of the voice, basically as a way to free oneself, to express oneself, and also to heal oneself. And she was spoken of really highly by a number of people that I knew. And serendipitously, she happened to be running a retreat very close to where I am. And we were able to sit down and have a talk. We had a bit of a limited time, so I think this episode went about 1 hour. But she shares some really beautiful wisdom, and she has a beautiful presence and I think a really deep embodied knowledge of the work she does. And so we spoke about the voice and about healing, also some about plant medicines, which she's also worked with. And it was a very fascinating conversation. She's, as I said, she's a really fascinating woman. She has a beautiful presence. And personally, I would actually love to sit and work with her, as I think I mentioned in the video. So I think you all will really enjoy this conversation. As always, if you are able to support this podcast, that's a really big help to me. Patreon is a really good option. It's a website, and you can sign up for as little as $1 a month. There's different tiers you can sign up for, and those tiers give you different things back, things like early access to shows, bonus material, Q&As. So that's a really big help to me. To all the people who have done that, thank you very much. I really like that idea of doing things based on reciprocity. So if you feel like you're gaining something from this podcast, that's really amazing way to support and to give back. There's also the ability to direct donate via PayPal. I'll put a link to those in the show notes. Also, I think with the YouTube channel, you can join the channel now, although I think the Patreon is actually a better option. And then if you're not able to do that, as always, the really small things really help a lot to get the show out to bigger audience, helping with the algorithm. So if you're watching on YouTube, hitting the subscribe button, turning on the notification bell, liking the video, leaving any questions or comments in the comments section, sharing the video with friends, family, and then with the audio version, going on Apple Podcasts, leaving a starred rating and a short review. That's a really big help. Also with Spotify now, there's the ability to rate the show as well. My friend and colleague Marav Artsy and I are continuing to run plant dietas. That's a really amazing opportunity if you feel like going deeper into this world of plants or discovering the world of plants. It's a really fascinating opportunity to go into isolation, to work with one plant, to work with both Marav and myself, and experience the traditions we've been trained in, the work that we do. It's a really powerful and profound experience. When this is released, we probably will have finished our Ireland dieta. I'm recording this quite a bit in advance, but as of now, we still have, I think, a couple spots open for our retreat in Israel, and then I believe as well in New York the following month. So we'll be in Israel in June, and then New York in July. And then after that, we should be back in the Sacred Valley of Peru towards the end of the year, potentially in October, but we haven't set a date for that yet. So I think that's it. Without further ado, here is my conversation with Almunis Alejandra Ortiz.
Running out from the maze, running out of the maze today. Running out from the maze, running out from the maze, running out from the maze today. Running out from the maze, running out from the maze, run out of the maze today.
Well, I had heard of you, I think originally through Jessica, and then also someone who's been working with Marab and myself. A student came to attend your workshop, and they both just spoke really highly of you. And it's interesting because a lot of the interviews, I know the people, so there's kind of I'm familiar with their work, but I think this will be a really interesting interview because I don't know a lot about your work. I mean, I know some, probably on the surface, so it'll be kind of an interesting exploration for me to also learn more about your work. So first, thank you for coming on. I know you're doing a lot, so thank you for taking the time. And we had lunch yesterday, so we got to know each other a little bit. But maybe just to start, if you could just say a little bit about yourself, who you are, and a little bit about your story, and also the work that you do.
Okay, so I'm Almunis. I was born in Colombia, and I have been working a lot with the voice as a tool for like self-knowing and self-transformation. So I have gathered like a lot of images, like a language of images, to support people in remembering the voice as a tool to create reality, kind of to work with the plasma and reform it first in the body, like vibrating our own body with the voice, and then creating like more coherent, harmonious realities based on listening, like through the bones, and receiving. So sort of the voice not used so much to express, but to impress, like upon like vibratory membrane, which is how I call kind of like our vibratory field. And I studied music, but my dad was deaf, and so it seemed like I was being given like a chance to heal and to really look deep into these like crossroads of like listening and expressing and being seen and being received, and I found that there was like a common theme there on this basic need of humans to feel seen, feel held, feel recognized, and feel accepted. And in my case, since I was a singer and my dad could not give me that, I realized that it was up to me to really receive myself on a like emotionally, but also like energetically, to impress that on my own field of bringing different aspects to unity by acknowledging and embracing and like listening, like really the power of listening. So that has been like a thread on my life, which has been listening, and listening to different voices within, and understanding all these different kind of guide from the universe as dimensions that can be accessed from within. So it's been a path of reordering kind of hierarchies of aspects of myself to support others in accessing the places within where we can receive guidance and knowing, in communication with everything that exists, but like as this consciousness that is one and has been like divided in different aspects or emanations. But how it's possible to communicate with these different aspects of the one consciousness by accessing places inside through like a process of developing the body as a vehicle for a state of presence and availability. So usually people come to me because they want to sing, or because plant medicine in terms of like ayahuasca ceremonies told them, oh, you have to sing, and or they are interested in learning like medicine songs and things like that. And then it's like, well, your medicine is not necessarily the medicine songs. It's like the sound that really wants to come through as an expression of bringing coherence first to your own field and embracing different aspects of yourself, and then that ripples out like a fountain, like opening the body as a fountain of I call them, like codes that order reality from a place of listening, of deep listening, not only of like wanting to accomplish something, but of being open, but very present in the body as a vehicle, in the instrument that is the body. So researching through practice and self-awareness the ways in which the body is an instrument and how sound is really shaping reality constantly, all the time, whether we are aware of it or not. So trying to develop that tangible sense of energy through the use of the voice, because it becomes something that is very real. It's manifested. It's not just something outside the body experience, but it's something that can be accessed through opening the hands and like listening through the bones. A lot of that process, and that results in people freeing their voices and singing their true, like authentic, embodied, like voice. So I call what I do like embodied voice, or voz auténtica in Spanish. And I've been doing retreats and workshops and sessions for many years, and living in different parts of the world, but sharing that connection to the voice as a tool for bringing coherence and harmony from a deep place of listening.
So it sounds like on the surface, because from the people I've spoke to who have spoken about you, it seemed like on the surface it was very much about the voice, but it sounds like from your point of view that's almost like an end product of something else that's going on inside.
Yes, because the voice shows everything. The voice is so transparent, and it really is a manifested form of your beliefs, the state of your emotional body, of your nervous system, the things that have been, as I said, like imprinted upon your vibratory body by experiences from this lifetime, from the womb, from other lifetimes. Is really like a manifestation of the essence in the present moment. So it is, it's sort of an excuse, but it is also through the voice that it's like it becomes really an instrument to embody like unity and coherence within like different inner dimensions.
So how would you describe the work you do, or the process you do of, you mentioned like freeing the voice? How would you, if someone had never like experienced that before, how would you walk them through what you're doing?
So I discovered that there's like certain portals in the body. I call them portals because I started experiencing, I was already like a singer, had a group that was called Lulacruza. We recorded a lot and for many years toured, but I started right at the beginning of that journey, maybe 20 years ago, that I started entering these states of like channeling sound. Like I would be on stage and this current would come that took over my body and would sing whatever it wanted to sing, and I could not change that and until it was completely done. And I could sense it was a very high frequency, people would cry, it was like a lot of integration and clearing of dense energies. But that was very uncomfortable for me to experience because it would happen. I had no context for that in the world that I lived, as a musician. And I started really trying to have like an agreement with this process so that it would use my body in a way that felt good, that would feel comfortable. And so I discovered that there were certain physical portals in the body that when they would open, then this would happen. And it would happen not only for me, but for other people. And that's what people many times experience in an ayahuasca ceremony, that these portals open and they can sing. And they are one, and everything is vibrating. And it's like, yeah, you can access that like without the help of the plant, taking it. And so it's a process of finding like a state of fluidity in the body, learning to trust the bone structure as a container, and working with, for example, the energy of gravity as a magnetic source that pulsates and sustains us, like physically. So it's not like, oh, the idea of Pachamama and sing is like, there is like a magnetic source of energy, and we can, when that is moving through us, then that can sing through us, meaning it can create through us. And the same from like a electric source above, like the sun or the central sun, or if, you know, however far up or to the core of that like consciousness, it can also move through the body. So there's like portals in the body to allow for a state of presence and availability, and then a lot of moving energy with our own hands as we make sound, to sweep in a way energies that are not ours and fill ourselves up with this kind of crystal resonant sound that is open, and that is usually very different from the voice that we use to sing. So for example, if somebody, you make a very weird voice, like you make a very strange use of your instrument. It's like, that's not really the sound of your instrument. I mean, it's expressing my desire to be loved, my desire to be seen, wanting to do it perfect, or wanting to praise spirit really hard, but that's not really the expression of the vehicle. So it's like we work with opening the vehicle for energy to run through, and then finding the places where we can be more resonant, like find that, I call it crystal resonance, because it feels really like that. It's like it's just touched and it vibrates, like rippling out, and that feels very different in the body and sounds very different. So people sing better, but also find like, wow, they have access to places within that were not given a chance to participate, you know. So we also work with integrating things from the lineage that have not been spoken, as coming from behind, and sort of like untying the knots in the stories, and just by giving way to the line of the story, then that energy is freed and becomes available. So, for example, like our ancestors can sing through, but they're not necessarily expressing the pain and the sorrow, because many times we connect with those energies and information that comes from the lineage as from like the pain body. But there is always like an expression of that pain, an expression of that sorrow, or of that abandonment, or the exile, so the voice is really like a higher dimension that can free by sharing. Tell me how horrible it was. And that's different, usually for people, to connect with their ancestral lines, not from a place of pain and heaviness, but what are the stories, you know. If that grandfather or that grandmother could sing, what would they be singing about? And so it's also like a liberation in that sense of the energy that has been stuck in from experiences. So you start accessing more and more like parts of the multidimensional body that are part of you. They're very part of our expression. And that's usually a very like, wow, like a big revelation, an integration for people that maybe we've been identifying ourselves with certain aspects, but there is always like a deep desire from these, like from the ascended aspects in this lineage for well-being, for flow, even if they never experienced that. They have at some point hoped or prayed very directly for us to be free, for us to be joyful, for us to be creative, and and supported and so on. So it's also working with that aspect of the ancestral component of our own being, because many times it's like these things have not been spoken or about, but it's not liberation in the sense of catharsis. So it's really like a very refined softening, allowing for the body to become very fluid, to unravel like the lines, and these lines, they go back until like you can tap into any line basically if you comb. I call it like combing the hairs of the ancestors, and it becomes very real. People do it. This becomes part of their true ancestral like voice, that many times I want to sing like Lakota songs, and everybody thinks that's like the ancestral voice. And like, maybe, I mean, you could tap into that eventually, but what is really pressing to be untied and expressed in that way, what wants to flow from your true like genetic makeup. So it's very beautiful, and that voice becomes very healing to receive for others, because it's not like wanting to be something. It's like, okay, I am this, and it's a lot about embodying water, like works a lot with the water qualities of the voice, like fluid and touching and sensing and changing and being clear through flow.
How did you develop this? Because listening to you speak, I mean, I'm reminded of, a lot of what you're speaking about also really seems to draw on a lot of different techniques, a lot of different traditions. I mean, even this idea of, like sitting, like being rooted on the earth, that gravitational pull, like the structure of the body. I mean, so many traditions, there's this idea of like sitting straight, and but I think there's a lot of like esoteric reasoning behind it, physical reasoning. I mean, channeling reason, these ideas of like trauma, of ancestral wounds, of channeling that, these ideas of even like the water element. It's very, I mean, it's also very related to a lot of plant work, even like ayahuasca you mentioned, very much this idea of like the dream space, the unconscious. And so it seems like you're tapping into a lot of things. Was that just through your own self-exploration and then working with people and seeing what worked and what didn't?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I don't think I really had like a teacher or like one practice, or I always wanted to have a teacher, but it never worked out that way. I would perceive a lot and see what was moving through the teacher and so on. And I think I was invited to kind of dance with what I was feeling. Definitely like a connection with ayahuasca. Like, she's such a beautiful teacher of flow in that way, of like this vibration that just makes everything go back to reweaving reality. But it was always more like a confirmation of my perception. And actually the spirit of ayahuasca always told me, you don't need me. I'm here to tell you that everything that you're perceiving is real, but you don't need me. I'm with you. We are one. How can we be separate, right? I think a lot of these, like specifically, there was like a moment of initiation that I experienced with a teacher that she actually initiated many of the sound healers that are now like the big teachers. She was a woman called Sarah Benson, and she was, I feel like, directly receiving from kind of a star beings this information of like crystal rainbow body, or of working with energy and of sound and frequency, to to remember like other, like octaves, right? Like other dimensions that are not like apparent, with a very, very loving presence. It was very, and I feel that my channel opened. Like I did one workshop with her, and it was very, like I started having that opening come to me, and having to manage the energy that moved through, and people at the same time, because I had like a career as a musician, were asking me for voice lessons, so I could see where they were blocked in their system, and the certain ideas that they had about themselves, of who they wanted to be seen as through their singing, was really like not allowing the voice of their container and their vehicle to come through. So it was really through trying and finding a language to speak through images about my own experience, so people would reach that state. And then I saw that it worked, that people would actually open the portals and access these aspects of themselves, and that they could flow, and then they could sing. And it's like that. I think there's some like practices or principles from Anusara yoga that works with like some principles of alignment. So it's a type of yoga that I think has things from like taoist, more like, working with gravity and working with organic energy and subtle energy, and not so much about muscles and pulling and straightening, but a lot about working with the energy that is pulsating from source outside the body, and really having your axis be sustained and nourished from this, like the magnetic and the electric sources. And then I saw later that there's other people that speak about it that I don't know so much about, but I find a lot of confirmation, and that makes me happy. Yeah.
Why for you is the voice so important? Because again, looking at a lot of traditions, I mean, I think probably most people listening are familiar with like the Judeo-Christian teachings, and I mean that's the beginning of Genesis, is the word. You mentioned plant medicine, and we were talking about the Shipibo the other day, and that's their main tool, is the voice.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times people, even people who've worked with plants or maybe ayahuasca, Shipibo, that power of the Ikaro, the song, they feel it, like they feel something is transforming. But I think there's sometimes still a block of like, how is that happening, or why is that so important? Often under the mediación, people are very connected to it, but once it stops, then it was just, it was a song or something. But it seems like something, and I would imagine as a musician, like you have to think a lot about the voice. It's as you said, for a lot of people, it's their identity, it's their vocation. But I think for most people, they don't think so much about the voice. It's just, this is my voice, or this is how I speak, and there's not a story around it. There's no, it is what it is. So why do you think like the manifestation of the voice is so important and holds so much power?
Yeah, it's so beautiful. Well, everything that exists is in a state of vibration, as we know. Everything is vibrating. So what appears to be solid is vibrating, but at lower rate. Thoughts are vibration, colors are vibration, smells, emotions. So everything is in a state of vibration. And that there is a principle in life, like a physical principle, which is the principle of entrainment, which is that any body that is vibrating can make another body vibrate. It's like it pulls it to vibrate in consonance. It's like, for example, when you have two pendulums and they're oscillating, after some point they move together. And so this principle of entrainment makes any sound that we create consciously or unconsciously as well, I guess, be able to set another vibrant body in motion to the same rate. So it's like actually creating reality, like when you it's like ripples, like with the cymatics, you can see like a sound is creates patterns, and this is, I think, conceived in every like tradition, that sound creates reality, that there's like the word, the sound, the primordial sound, there is a first that sets everything in motion. And the importance of the voice in terms of making sound and the power that sound has to like actually is creating reality is that our containers are unique. And so even though we're working with the energy of the air and the magnetic pull from, the crystal core of the earth, like this, or the sun, it's like all the same elements, but they happen connected to our individuality, our identity in a way. And so when we can really allow for Source to move through us and create through us, it's like becoming a fountain of creation in a way that can only happen in that way, like a crystal, when the light touches it and it creates a prism that can only, or a sound that it can be created only through that specific configuration and the shape and the material and the density and how the light is hitting it. So it's very, I think the connection is with something that is, wow, I let go of layers and layers of who I think I am, and really allow for Source to move through. However, it will move in a very unique way that will resonate and set like in motion, like a creative force that also resonates with people differently based on how they feel more coherent with me or less. Maybe there's no so much resonance, but it's like a very beautiful way of taking on individuality by being aware of unity, like it's all being fed by the same sun, the same movements of the stars, and the water is all one water, experiencing, changing, like becoming vapor, becoming clouds, becoming very stagnant, so it's this like, but it's all the same water is all water, and it's inside the bodies and so on. So there's this beautiful chance to recognize the value of individuality as we search for unity, but being like, actually there's something that comes through my unique channel, my vehicle, because of my body, my ancestors, my thoughts, my ideas. And the more authentic I can be with that, the more I can shed like layers and layers of needing to be seen, conditioning, parts of ourselves that we don't think are valid or are unlovable. Then it's like, okay, there's a big integration that I feel many people are called to embrace. What am I here to do? So it really dwells or deals with creating, like, how am I a creator of reality? What's the highest way in which I can serve and exchange with the world? And I think the voice is this primordial instrument to do that, as seen throughout like cultures. It's like, what are we here to do? We're here to sing and dance. That's it. That's what we can offer. The rest is given. Everything is given. And of course, that creative force can take the form of very complex creations, but it's all, like an expression of Source through the unique container that is each one of us.
I was reminded, I've mentioned this a few times in the podcast, but there's this really beautiful idea in Shipibo, this word of hakun, which is usually translated as good, but on a deeper level it means truth. So that which is good is that which is true. And in a deeper level, from what I understand, it means that which is life-giving. So something that's not true is not good because it's not life-giving. It's not creative. And so that idea of truth and goodness is life-giving. It's the creative energy. So would you say with the voice, like when that becomes to be free, much like you were using that example of the two pendulums coming into synchronicity. I was also interviewing an ayahuasquero here in the valley, Alonso del Rio, and he was saying a very similar thing in a way of like, even our words, I mean, and this is where the question is kind of leading, but even our words, he was saying like if someone is encouraging you and telling you beautiful things, like there's actually there's a physical transformation that begins to happen. There's a relaxing, there's like a caressing, a holding, versus if someone is telling you words that are cutting you down or derogatory or like not hakun, they're not creative, they're not life-giving, that there's very much a destructive energy in that. And so in that way, how also our words can not only affect ourselves, but then they begin to affect others. So with that voice, because I think maybe it was Jessica or Alex was mentioning that some of your work too is this idea of the voice is also healing. And so do you think there's like a symbiotic relationship that's happening as your voice frees, you are healing yourself, and then the voice itself, like that vibration, is then also in that feedback loop continuing to release you even more?
Yes, because I think there's less friction, there's more coherence in the field, and that creates a vibration that integrates like isolated aspects of ourselves. So I think there's a lot of integration that happens when we realize the places where we hold tension with the voice are the places where we hold tension on our physical body, on our emotional body, within our like thought system, or that we've received, imprints. So there's like this tension, and there's something that is not like moving all together without friction. And when that happens, it's like, wow, a relief for yourself, but also the sound result of that for others is very healing, because it has that same effect of softening and caressing and being like, it is okay, you are okay, every part is okay. I have this idea that it's like we all want to, we're in this moment where this like one consciousness has been divided into individual like identities. And when we feel good, it's like, we feel like, it's actually all one. We are actually all connected and everything is affecting everything. And my little part is like when I connect with that aspect of my consciousness that remembers unity, there's a softening that also allows for isolated parts of ourselves to come back into agreement and into being acknowledged and being held. There is a beautiful process that I do with, for example, with emotions, things or aspects of ourselves or expressions of ourselves what we don't like. Okay, I don't want to be, very picky and very hard on others, which is a part of me that comes out, and I don't like it. But what can I do with that? Because it continues to appear. But there's a certain desire in that aspect of ourselves that wants to be held, wants to be seen, wants to belong. It's like this basic desire to be, I just want to belong. And so I do this process when I ask people to be like, okay, bring this part of yourself that you don't want, that is acting out. Sit it, like as you would sit a crying baby. They're freaking out, they're like making a mess, they're not being nice, right? They're not. You sit and you're like, okay, what do you want? What do you need? And they're like, usually they're just, I just want to be loved. I want to be loved how I am. I want to have the right to be. I want to be part of the unity. And then it's like, okay, you are okay. This part of me that is like that, and I can have explanations for why it exists and so on, but really deeply just wants to be loved, just wants to be accepted. And there's a way of doing that with the voice, of expressing parts of ourselves that are the ones that we think are unlovable, and let ourselves be seen through that mask, of course, within a container where we are integrating. And these masks that we wear, which are pretty much expressed like very clearly through our voices, how we sing, oh, I'm going to be a shamanic singer, oh, I'm going to be very angelic, oh, I'm going to be very sensual and very, and it's like we have all these identities. They're like, oh, I feel safe here. But it becomes like, that's just a mask. It's one aspect of who you are. And so by kind of showing ourselves and being like, this is okay, eventually, through physically like embracing that and the vibratory body and seeing the places where it comes, the gestures that it makes, there is like a relaxing into being and a feeling of being accepted and being held, that then these parts don't need to be like acting up so much. You are okay. Yeah, you developed because of this and that, but it's not the totality of who we are. But there is a part within ourselves that can love everything as it is. And that is closer to that consciousness that brings healing and restoration. So there is a lot about like a regenerative process, not so much as like cathartic or expressing, as I say, but it's like an integration and a coming to terms with these different parts within that results in a softening. And that softening is like very strengthening, and ultimately our trust and confidence to share who we are with the world comes more from this place of holding and embracing who we are than pushing and being brave, and because there's still so much I want to be seen as this. So as the voice changes, our need to be seen changes, and we start to be the one who sees us, who sees ourselves. So becoming that motherly, fatherly like aspect that we're constantly kind of looking outside for the teacher, for the master, for the am I doing it okay? How can I know if this is okay? And there is an aspect within that knows, and that can be, we access it by starting to bring parts together. And in other traditions it's like, oh, you're the witness of the thoughts, and you're not the thoughts, you're the witness. In a way it's like a loving witness to all these parts that are moving, and they need to move. They can't just be kept hiding or stored. So I believe a lot in that, the power of moving, like moving with it, and that brings like a steadiness of presence through allowing these things to flow within a container that is holding lovingly the different things that are coming up.
I was thinking, because often it seems like with the voice, that there's often, as you were describing, this quality of sound, of resonance, of healing, of freeing, of flow, which is something very personal in a way. It's like this freeing, this liberation aspect. And I was also thinking, because I was reminded of yoga, and the way a lot is practiced is this like getting into a flow state, like relaxing, and there's this freeing aspect that comes from that. But then I was also thinking, also with the voice, like we were speaking about yesterday with Emika, like a big part of that teaching, or many teachings, is I would imagine not just the quality of the voice, but actually the content of the voice. Like, what are the actual words that are coming out of my mouth?
Yes.
Because those words have power. They can unite, they can divide.
Absolutely.
But I would imagine even maybe, I don't know, I guess this is a question, but I was thinking about yoga because, maybe someone has a really free body. They're very flexible, they're very open, but maybe the content of what's coming out also isn't in alignment. So with the voice, do you think those two things are correlated, or is there some different aspect between the nature of like the state of that voice, that state of allowing and freedom versus like what's actually coming out of my mouth?
No, I think they're very connected. However, I like to, when I work, it's like I don't start with, let's just say good words, so then the voice becomes something good. It's like a lot about working with the voice as a vibrant energy, like a material. So it's like it has to move. So for the longest time, we don't use words to really get in touch with that, because we can bypass by just, I just pray. I pray to Great Spirit, and it's like, yeah, but you're destroyed. And it's beautiful that we pray, but I kind of work with like, okay, there's some material here. And the vowels, they resonate and they move energy in a specific ways. And this is also said, in every like sacred ancient traditions. It's like it's actual. It's not only the content, but it's creating a pattern, a vibratory pattern. So we work a lot with that, with really using the sound to create patterns in the body and sense that. And then there's certain like codes that come from that reordering, and some sacred languages that patterning, that when you say the word, it's actually creating that form in what I call in the plasma, in the vibrant energy matter that makes everything up. But there's a very beautiful exercise, for example, that I do within like the container of the retreats, when I guide people through these stages. And in this state of presence, where we are like, okay, the body is available, and you do certain practices with the breath, where you remain with the energy as it is moving, like really being aware of, let's say you make a sound, it's creating a pattern in a specific place in the body. It's not just like a prayer out into the universe. It's creating it has resonance in certain places in the body. And when we do this practice of really remaining completely present, then I ask them to start using words. Every single person in every retreat of the many that I've done in workshops starts speaking about the heart and the sun and the water. It's like the poetry of presence. And it's not like, it's not just beautiful words that are life-giving. It's like everybody starts speaking about the heart. Because then it's kind of felt as this like source that is like emanating in this self-recognition of its quality to embrace, to be in awe, to perceive. There is like the heart. And that's very beautiful, because people who engage in this process and start using words from basically managing energy, it's like, wow, this is what wants to be said, this is what wants to be praised. But I do find that sometimes starting only with the words can make you bypass certain things that in my work I like to gather as vibrant energy purely through sensing. And there is a sacred intelligence that starts wanting to create and make words and praise and find the offering that is our flow, like our true flow. So I can connect this with the yoga teachers are like, they're amazing in their body and how they're moving energy, and yet there's something that I think is like they're still wanting to be seen. They're still looking outside for recognition. And then there's a piece that is like a bit. I remember I went to a class, I don't know, of yoga 25 years ago, and they're like, okay, press your knees together if you're holding $100. Bill. I was like, oh my God, I'm dying. It's like, no, this is not okay. You know, it's like I was somewhere else. And I was like, okay, this is not the right place for me. Like, just to develop muscles or power with your body vehicle is like, no. But I have found that through really working with the presence of this pulsating source of the core of the earth and the sun and the stars, wow, it always goes back to the heart as like a resonator, as like a diamond resonator that, wow, is the true source of the power, and usually creates beautiful, life-giving words.
I was also reminded, because we were speaking about Amika, like this idea of roles that people traditionally had in society, and I could be wrong about this, but it seems like there's often a pattern in many roles. Because I was also thinking about my own experience, and when you mentioned this idea in the beginning of, like, there was just this energy that was coming through you that felt like it needed to come out, that it was being channeled from somewhere else other than you or your mind. It seems like, and again, this could just be my experience, but it seems like that tends to happen more to women. And even when we were speaking about those roles, like in traditional societies, like that role of the dancer, the woman who moves her body, moves her voice in order to heal, not herself primarily. I mean, it has to start there, but she's the healer of the group, the tribe, the community, through that movement, through that voice, through that softness. Do you think there is something archetypal in the woman that embodies that more, or is it just that for whatever reason men also may be blocked through society, through their own conditioning? Have you noticed any of that in your own work?
Such a beautiful question. Well, I actually work a lot. I say that I work a lot kind of like with recovery, people recovering from like ayahuasca circles and kind of this idea of the ancestral indigenous work as being the man is the center and the steadiness and the Shiva quality and the rock, and woman is flow and water and food and beauty and flowers. And in my own experience, I was together with a very powerful chief shaman for some time, the father of my daughter, and I saw kind of like within that way of understanding reality that many of us have been called to or have received as like, oh, this is how it should be, like these are the energies we embody, and that was very hurtful for me, because I think that there was an aspect of my own energy that had to do with the column of light, the being erect, the being like that. I had put that in him, that he was the one who would embody that, and it was easier for women to identify with this flowing, receptive quality. And I actually work with a lot of women who are like very flowy, very free, very expressive, but like a total mess for manifesting, directing, atravesar, no? They have a hard time penetrating and planting and being. And I think there is a big aspect of cultural conditioning, because I receive again and again the message, and when I had like this very difficult kind of separation from this beautiful being who was my ex, it was like that energy that you put there, the sun, the stuff, that's your inner masculine. So your work is to bring that within. And you're like, no, but he's such a big chief, sun dancer chief. Like, how is this ever going to? Like, that's the one you chose. That's the one you need to bring within yourself to complete yourself. It was hard because I had identified a lot with certain qualities, and I think I did it in a very beautiful way. Or maybe I'm still doing it. Of course, a never-ending process of integration, but I saw, and I teach that a lot because I think we have roles, but I'm not sure if they're necessarily like that, like men are more like that and women are more flowy. And I have worked a lot with men. Of course, there's almost always more women in any workshop of self-development than men. But more and more men are coming, and they are working a lot with this creative, flowing source within, and this sense of this stuff, kind of like the Shiva lingams, just, and it's like, in your own yoni source. So it's like I see that men, how I perceive the energy body of men, there is, I call like the energetic womb. And I know there's some tribes in Brazil that speak about this. It's like, men have like a source that would be like the womb in women, part of their energetic body. And when they have that developed, they are contained within themselves. They're not looking all the time for, there's an opening here to receive my energy, right? Looking always for that source, that receptive quality to be outside of their own bodies. And in the completing the body as a vehicle, I work a lot with that, with receiving kind of this like energy from the sun as like a column of erect, penetrating light that sits in the watery crystal, like a source in men and women in the pelvic bowl, like really like a bowl that contains the energy. And that feels very different for men, especially when they're like a mess, they're like going to ceremonies, going to workshops, doing, they're like looking outside. And there's a certain like, okay, I find a source. And I think that I met my partner that I have now from a place where he was also working a lot with his feminine quality, with his flowing, praising quality, and that allowed us, I think, to meet as creative beings more complete. In my experience, that has to do with these ideals that we picked up unconsciously from society, but also consciously from like the teachings of indigenous ancestral roles. And I have gotten this message that is like that has been current up to a certain era, and now it's like it doesn't work like that anymore. That's the message I get, with all the respect for all of the teachings and all of the technologies, but I get this like, you are complete. And of course we need the different principles to come together to create life, but there's a certain creative integration of these inner aspects of like awareness and energy, steadiness and flow that are found within. And that's actually a big part of my work, of this integration of these aspects of in the creative process. That I don't know how that would be seen by traditional societies, but it seems to me that's kind of like a memory that comes from a more ancient, in my case, like star, like lineage, that is like, actually we're complete within our container. We create as couples and we create as communities, but there's a certain like a coming together inside that might make the men feel more flowy, and that doesn't, because I've seen men open their channel the same way as women when they are at least feel called to this work that speaks about that integration of the inner penetrating and receptive qualities.
Yeah. It was interesting. You were asked yesterday kind of about like your connection, and I think it was phrased like what do you see, and you said something very interesting, which was, and maybe I got this wrong, but not that I'm like seeing so much with my eyes, but it's more this like felt sense, and that to me seems to be something I've also found to be very true with myself, and because I think often in these types of work, or there's often this quality of like what do you see, and there's a lot of emphasis on this one aspect of this manifold ability to sense things, I find that felt sense seems to encompass maybe all of that, but it goes even deeper in a way, because it's something that's beyond just like, oh, well, I see this, or yeah. Can you speak a little? I mean, I know that's it's very kind of obtuse, but or maybe like why that's important, or because it seems like to some degree there's like this intuitive sense, and it seems like something that a lot of people are really cut off from. And you know, that could be part of my own story, but I remember when I was younger, it seemed very easy for me to. I remember meeting people, even as a young child, and I'd be like, that person's a little sketchy, like. But they would be praised by so many people, and I was like, why do they not see that? I mean, I would even use that word, but it wasn't just it wasn't just my sight that was seeing it. There was a deep felt sense that. And I remember even getting into this plant work, there was a lot of this idea of like, well, what do you see? You know, when you diagnose someone, what do you see? And I was like, well, I just see them. It's not like there's like crazy shapes or something coming out of them. But there was a deeper sense of where someone was at, or
It's such a mystery. But I remember once. Somebody said, well, there's different like extra, I mean, they're called like extrasensorial, how do you call that in?
Extrasensorial.
Like abilities that are different for different people. Many of us, we can develop many, but there are some that are like really like gifts or qualities. We can certainly all expand a lot, but in my understanding, it was very useful to understand that some people were like clairvoyants, like they could see, that you can see things or you can hear things, but this like a specific way of sensing was clear sensing, clarisintiente. Because it was very confusing, because I would just know, I just know something, and I would doubt so much because I don't see it, I don't hear it. Some people hear. I would just know, and that was difficult to validate. I mean, I learned, I'm stubborn. like, no, it's not true, and have a lot of integrity, so I would like really work with that through self-doubt, not being like, oh, I see stuff, or I know things. It's like, I don't want to, is this true? So that's why I don't read books about stuff, and I try to really know by direct experience, and then life from outside is like, yeah, that's true. And I learned, but it's very mysterious still to me. People ask me, how do you know that? I don't know. I don't know. But I know that it has to do with my ability to trust my perception and be present, because I'm not like, oh, I sense and I want to look into your field. And I started like developing what I called protocols with aspects of myself, to be, because I would arrive to a place and I would feel like, oh, here a lot of indigenous people died, and there's all these trapped souls, you know, like, and it's like, I don't know if it's a memory from me, if it's a memory from the place. It was very messy, and then I was like, well, I started asking my higher self or my guides, or like to communicate with this part of me that knew, that was seeing. We're like, okay, only show me what is mine. Don't show me what is from a place. Don't show me what is, and try to have a dialogue, to discern, and then be like, okay, if it's useful for me to know that your dead mom is trying to speak to you, may that be open and shown clearly that I'm supposed to tell you something. Otherwise, please don't show me, don't come. If it's just to show me that I see, that I perceive, don't show me, because I get very confused, because I would like spill, you know, be like, oh, you guys see this, you know, very early on. And I was like, oh, that's not good. It's not serving. So how can I use this to serve? So I think kind of I naturally didn't want to be like that, be seen. I didn't want to be seen. And that helped me in trying to like really make this very concrete and be like, if this is good for somebody, please show me. Otherwise, don't show me. I don't need to be seeing things. And I discovered there's something that I call like the vibratory membrane. It was like a way that I found to collect my own energy and be able to discern what was mine, and then kind of. But I think in my case, like I had to learn on my own, because I connected a lot with seers and shamans, because they were the ones who also had access to these things. But then I would see things in the ceremony. I'm like, I don't know about this. And life always was like, take space. Don't just trust them because they are the seer or the shaman. But you need to take space to discern. And I think that might be useful for some people to know that it's how to recover that, like sober, like a expansion of your awareness. But that is also, in my case, I developed it a lot asking, like, okay, show me in dreams in the way that I can understand. Don't show me with these like very magical images that I can't digest. So it's like, I had a very beautiful meeting with an African seer who worked with water. And he was like, your guides are so tired of you and not paying attention. And I was like, I'm sorry. Like, he's like, ask them to show you in the way in which you can be of service. Because he knew that would be, okay, if it's to be of service, I take it. I'll allow myself to feel it and know it and use it. So I think that dedication, since when you dedicate your practice to benefit all sentient beings, is different than it's like, I want to be, have a fit body and be. It's different. And so I think those things can be opened from a higher place within ourselves to truly serve, And my prayer was always to be of service. And I thought, okay, I'll just be, picking up trash in the ceremonies and being very small. It was like, no, you have to sit there and you have to speak and you have to do. And we are sometimes afraid to be seen, to really use our gifts to support others. But there's a way of strengthening that axis and that vibratory membrane to be safe as we expose ourselves, and that feels different from wanting to see and wanting to help by being it's like, who wants to be a shaman? It's like, it's so much work, So I think we're dealing with a lot of fantasies in this, like as things are expanding, but always a prayer to be of service, and then, okay, if that's, and I always tell this to people when they're like, oh, if you're supposed to sing in front of thousands of people, you open your channel and that's where you're supposed to be, like, great. If you're supposed to only sing for your plants and your pets and to yourself, like, oh, it's the same. It's just taking the role that is given. And that might be different. That might be dancing, like crazy, or being very steady and holding space. But there is a certain integration, again, with aspects within that allows us to be more authentically taking on the roles and feeling good about taking them. So some people don't see anything, and it's okay. You're not meant to. Not everybody's meant to, or has the what I call like the energetic integrity to deal with that. And it's better to find that authenticity and know that is a way of serving through your unique channel.
Yeah, that seems one kind of beautiful thing about that idea of having a role is just realizing that we all have different roles.
Yeah, we do. Certainly. It's very, very beautiful. Yeah, I had one teacher who says, like, it's just about playing the role that you're given, and you just fully take the role. And it can be being very visible, or being, staying very steady and holding an inner knowing with fluidity, with presence.
Well, beautiful. We're I think coming up almost on our time. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about, or anything we didn't touch on?
Well, if people want to hear the music that I make, they can look for Minük or Lulacruza, and I have like an online course that is like a multi-dimensional temple that gives this transmission. Right now it's in Spanish only, and I have some retreats coming up and so on, if people feel called to do this work. So, and I'm so happy to get to talk to you and meet you and be in your presence. Thank you.
Oh, the same. Yeah, it's really a pleasure. The upcoming retreats, do you know where they'll be and the dates?
In the summer in Europe, there's like in Portugal in June, close to Berlin in July, Sweden in August. So everything is like on my website or my...
Yeah.
Yes, it's such a beautiful space, to get to make sound with other people. It's beautiful.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate this and your time, and you have a beautiful presence. And if you ever come back here or somewhere else in the world, I would love to join you.
No, we will. We plan to be back here in Arin next year. It's been so powerful to work here with the waters and the crystals, and it's really amplified and received by the earth. That's, this alliance of caretakers and